Premo ato Ghana de shima mayema mu nyina ha ma mo akwa aba eba baraka 98.7 premo to break as eboyi so nsem bi esisi wo man mu na ne asa mufu agepene aso ne so se yemfa mbeso metiefo nyina se baraka 98.7 premo to break as ebo ene yen kase ebo ne nsem bi edi mu akotin ebi ni se Ghana man pahin his excellency John Dramani Mahama Samri wakasa na nsem odi tu gwa no kase ebo edi mu ntwemba beso etiefo nyina sanso na oman Ghana ha se aso ya hwa akonta bu hu nsem so de nsem bi atogwa nsem be na wodi tu gwa kase ebo edi mu ntwemba beso etiefo nyina nsem keka we ni mu na ne asamufu agepene aso ne so se yemfa mbeso etiefo nyina se baraka 98.7 premoto break asebo ene kasebo emi amedi mu akoti midi ameje so ene anti agimpacho yentwe yon kakra ne emra ya ba ibebo break asebo ne ntwetwemu mu
Baraka FM 98.7 station a ewo nhira wuti a obeye nhira na wonya nkanko
yema etiefo nyina kwa aba afa yentie kasebo no ntwetwemu Ghana man pahin his excellency John Dramani Mahama akasa edin sembi atuga opahin chiremu a emre obetina akonya so se Ghana man pahin no nhyehyai ahoro a aban yi edi aba na aboa pa ni titiriu eba no yemfem agudu a yetu edi fi oman mu ha edi koman foforo so aboa yen yie pa efimra odi gold board eba yi no aboa small scale mining no ama mfaso de ese Ghana yenya ewo fem agudu a yetu ha no yenya ne yie ama oman no so akọ nanim yentie nsema odi tugwa.
And on the issue of resource sovereignty, we must break the colonial mode of large foreign-owned concessions, extracting value for the benefit of foreign interests and entities while Africa remains in poverty. And as Sam Jonah said, we must be boldly selfish and claim a fairer share of our natural resource endowment. In Ghana, I'll give you a simple example. We're exercising greater sovereignty over our natural resources. The establishment of the Ghana Gold Board has given us greater control over our gold exports. In 2024, total gold exports from the small-scale mining sector was said to amount to 63 tons. Of this volume, the foreign exchange repatriation accounted for only about 40 tons of the exported gold. 23 tons of forex did not come back. Since the establishment of the Gold Board in April 2025, exports from the small-scale mining sector to date have increased to 104 tons, with 100% of the foreign exchange repatriated through our central bank. Ghana is also increasing the participation of indigenous Ghanaian companies in mining and other natural resource extraction activities. Local content laws have been passed that make it mandatory for non-Ghanaian investors to partner with local companies in all mining and extractive investment activity. Africa's industrialization must be anchored in value addition and beneficiation.
Eno na chi ni Ghana man pahin course so etweremu se obepie mu oman Ghana mu ha yemfidi dwuma no enkwa nim pa se ye de ensa ebeye bibi anase mfidi ya beboa ama yetumi aye bribi ama oman no anase mebunu wo man mu nso anya bibi aye no eno no enkwa nim ye nti embra so se ye betumi aboa apeja yemfidi dwuma no ye bepeja mu atreu mu ama emebunu a ewo Ghana ha anya dwuma ye o kire mu se enam se yemfidi dwuma no ye ntumi mpeja mu eno nti mebunu bebre efi oman mu ha ko oman foforo so ekwadi pa eno no emboa
The central question before us is simple. How do we finance Africa's industrialization at the required scale and speed? Industrialization is capital intensive, yet access to long-term affordable finance remains constrained, especially for small and medium-sized enterprises that employ the majority of Africa's industrial workforce. With the right instruments, industrial bonds, infrastructure funds, diaspora financing, and blended finance vehicles, this capital can be channeled into productive industrial investments, private sector investments, public-private partnerships, risk-sharing mechanisms, and credit guarantees. These are essential if we are to finance our industrialization. We can no longer accept an economic model that consigns Africa to exporting raw materials and importing finished goods. That model is a neo-colonial arrangement that is designed to trap Africa in perpetual poverty. It is important for Africa to industrialize on the basis of its comparative advantages. Manufacturing and agro-processing creates jobs, they raise incomes, deepen skills, and anchor inclusive growth. They enable us to retain more value from our own resources and build resilient economies. And yet today, Africa's share of global manufacturing remains low, below 2%. Too many of our economies are locked into low productivity and primary production, compelling millions of young Africans to seek opportunities elsewhere. We must act urgently if we are to change this narrative.
Any IT ye Ghana man pehine His Excellency John Dramani Mahama ne anayeti no yeto ansem ne so a eye oman aso eye awhwen akontabu insem so sami nwa akasa adinsem bia to go a okyeremu a eye afi etwam busum ye November busum na eba no adansi hu nioma na ewo soro na eye 5.9%. Nenso se ade aban hihye pa aboa ama eso atokra aba 4.4%. Eno no betimi aboa ama nkrofo opese wosi dan nenso enioma bu ayedin ama wo nyina betumi esidan afenso won opese won to adan so won ho ben ha won ama won so enya bebi edi wonti ato nsem sei ana kontabufu no edi tugwa.
On a month-on-month basis, inflation was negative 0.2 for December 2025. Month-on-month inflation means how prices changed between November and December 2025. And this tells us that building input prices fell by 0.2% in December. What this really means is that building inflation continues to cool. In fact, the December year-on-year inflation of 4.4% represents an 8th consecutive drop, and it is down from 5.9% in November 2025. For labor, year-on-year inflation declined to 10.7% in December 2025, down from 12.7% in November. On a month-on-month basis, labor prices fell by 0.9% between November and December 2025. For materials, year-on-year inflation eased to 2.7% in December 2025, down from 4.2% in November 2025. Month-on-month material prices reduced slightly by 0.1% between November and December 2025. For plant, inflation rose to 5.6% year-on-year, up from 5.3% in November, and plant prices increased by 1.5% month-on-month. Overall, the main story is that construction inflation is being driven more by labor and plant pressures, while materials inflation is easing. For government, this is a good time to spend strategically and fast-track key infrastructure projects, including the big push, while targeting the top drivers. The persistent labor inflation also suggests a skills gap, so expanding training for artisans is important. For businesses, we advise you to lock in today's prices and secure medium-term contracts while inflation is low before any potential rebound. For households, with material prices stabilizing, it may be a good time to start or resume your building projects, and you can face your work to benefit from the reducing cost pressures.
When in sema aswea washe akonta humbu nsem ewo man Ghana ha edi tugwa. Yet wakase bone so akonsen fufrum so a Governor Edima Bank of Ghana aye Dr. Johnson Desiama ono so wakasa tremu a ubepie mo man Ghana ha nyankopon adaroma bibia akoso totin yensi kasem ejina sidi ni jina ne nanso ye enam so ema policy rate a eda eye ukwaji abanbusie bi no na enka no na eye 18%. Nenso se de nam hyehyɛ pa atwedi ampo nyankopon adum nti Ghana yenya no eso atokra ede aba eye 15.5%. Ono so nsema odi tugwani.
The latest forecast and 6 months ahead survey-based inflation expectations, which we monitor, these indicate that headline inflation is broadly expected to be within the medium-term target, barring potential spillover risks from upward adjustments in utility prices and commodity market volatility. GDP growth is expected to remain strong in 2026, with the output gap narrowing. This may introduce moderate demand-side pressures. The committee, that's the MPC, judged that current monetary conditions do remain tight relative to prevailing inflation dynamics. Sustaining Ghana's macroeconomic gains will hinge on disciplined fiscal policy, strong policy coordination, and targeted agricultural interventions to contain food inflation while remaining vigilant to heightened geopolitical tensions. Based on the foregoing considerations, the committee, the MPC, by a majority decision, voted to lower the monetary policy rate by 250 basis points to 15.5%. The committee will continue to monitor developments closely and take appropriate policy actions to ensure that the gains from macroeconomic stability are translated into sustainable growth.
Any ITA governor Edema Bank of Ghana, Dr. Johnson, is Siama, on so many anayetin, yet work as a bonus so concern from Soa. Vice President, our my Ghana Muhaya Professor Jenana Opoku Ajimai, Samri Okupiemu, would you medic CB as a Epue Mantem, Royal Sechi. Now, Openhini Jana Simpisu Ekasani Sembia Oditu Guani say, and who been here saying she say Ahuro Nimrahuro Ayadiaba, say Emfa and Mariwa and Puntu Hono, Yabere say Yabeshemu de nothing so Yashamukina, Sanya Beya. Ghana mariwa nyina enso ebetimi anya won fa hodi ateno memu ha obia ntumi entieti won fa hodi so yenti ensem amampehini abedi ekiri edi tugwa.
There are over 60,000 children living and working on the streets in our country, mainly in the urban centers. Many of our children are not registered at birth. Many more remain deprived in terms of health, education, nutrition, water, sanitation, housing, and protection. Child poverty undermines health and learning and increases exposure to violence and exploitation. These challenges threaten our demographic dividends and aspirations, of course, for inclusive growth. If we fail our children today, we fail ourselves and Ghana tomorrow. The Ghanaian Against Child Abuse campaign continues to mobilize traditional authorities, religious leaders, and families to reject violence, child marriage, and exploitation. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, the Early Childhood and Care Policy Games. This aims to promote the survival, growth, and development of children from 0 to 8 years. The policy platforms early childhood into strategic national priority for sustainable development. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, these initiatives are needed to strengthen and improve collaboration among all stakeholders.
Ni ayetini ni Ghana ha mampehini abedi ekiri owo ha Professor Jenana Opoku Ajima emra okopiemu dwumadi kesi bia so pie mantem Royal Sechi ana okasa efa emra ne hihye ya Ghana ye de abasa embo mariwa ho ban no ye behwe se ebetumi de aye dwuma na afenso ya hyemu kena sane be ya mariwa ebefa won ho adi sane be ya obia ntumi entieti ya won fa ho di so sa kwan ne so ana brebe ma yen kwan na kase ba ye de beso mu no ye de ni nyina esi ni oso ne kase boy so de ma yen owura Sabi Mohammed, producer and so yadi nyina Owura Abdul Fatau. Technician so no so tena mfidi na echi ehwe ma yen. Se bibia nkoso afen so ochinchim mfidi ni funuma enso yadi nyina Owura Mohammed Nyaku aka Mufti. Me pacho ono no yen technician ya. Ohwe se kaseboy ebekoso jojo. Me nso kaseboy mejebre na me di muchi ya me din ya meje so anti agi pacho. Betimi afra Mrs. Nazameje wo so. Ya sorry so na enso yedi nyumpa mu yehwam ene ba beso mu. Eno sainti ne ye hye unkran se bomodi ansa wodi we free beto 98.7 Baraka FM sani awon so betimi abeka inshiraku no ho yada mu nyina asese moje bre na mutie Baraka FM yes still yen kwa ne radio station ya inshira yemu tise opese we inshira de a eni na tie yen na wa inshira yada wase yakra mu da se ne ye besan ye hia